Have you ever wondered what an outsider would see if they sat in on your leadership team meetings? Well, after 10 years of guiding early stage startups to Fortune 100 companies, I can watch any leadership team for 60 minutes and tell you exactly where they're going to struggle. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I see in the first 10 minutes that reveals everything. The behaviors that tell me who's really running your leadership team, and the one thing that shows me if your team will actually execute. Now let's start with what happens in those first few minutes that most leaders completely miss. I watch for something very specific in those opening moments, and it tells me more about your leadership team dynamics than anything that happens in the official agenda. It's not about what people say. It's about something far more revealing. Most leaders are focused on getting through their agenda. But in the first 10 minutes, your team shows me exactly who has real influence, who's just going through the motions, and who's already checked out. Here's what I'm watching for. When the meeting starts, who speaks first? But more importantly, how do the others respond? Do they lean in? Do they take notes? Do they ask follow-up questions? Or do they politely listen while checking their phones? When someone brings up a concern, whose reaction does the room watch for? When there's a moment of silence, who fills it? Now, these aren't random behaviors. They're the real org chart in action. And I know there are problems when I see certain patterns, like the leader talks first, but others respond with polite disengagement, or people consistently look to someone else for the real reaction, or there's an energy mismatch. The leader's energetic, but the team is flat, or vice versa. What I'm looking for is the actual power structure of your leadership team, not the one on paper. In the first 10 minutes, your leadership team reveals who they really follow and who they actually respect and who they're just managing up to. When there's a disconnect between formal authority and actual influence, decisions get made twice. Once in the meeting and once again in the real conversation afterward. That's why your great meetings don't always translate to great execution. High-performing leadership teams have alignment. Struggling leadership teams have split authority, and you can see it in the first 10 minutes. I've put together a cheat sheet for you so you can follow the exact process I use for identifying real power structure of your leadership team, and I'll tell you how to get it coming up. Even if the opening dynamics of your leadership team meeting look healthy, there's something else that happens when the conversation gets difficult that reveals who's really in charge. Most leadership teams look functional when they're discussing easy topics. Everyone participates, ideas flow, there's good energy. But I don't learn anything about your leadership team from the comfortable conversations. What I'm really waiting for is the moment when someone brings up something controversial. A budget cut, a personnel issue, a strategic disagreement, a missed deadline. Something that creates tension in the room. The uncomfortable conversations tell me everything. And there's one specific behavior that happens in these moments that reveals the entire power structure of your team. Here's what I'm watching for. When the controversial topic hits, whose reaction does the room monitor? Not whose opinion they're waiting for, whose reaction they're watching for. It might be the person who hasn't said anything yet, but suddenly everyone's paying attention to their body language. It might be the person who always stays quiet during conflict, but their facial expression determines how the conversation continues. Sometimes it's obvious, and everyone literally turns to look at the same person. But usually it's more subtle. People glance sideways, they pause before responding, they soften their language, or they suddenly become more diplomatic. The room's energy shifts toward one person. What I'm identifying is who the real decision maker is when things get difficult, not who makes decisions when everything's easy. Who the team looks to when there's actually something at stake. And when the leader isn't the person the team looks to during pressure moments, you have a leadership credibility gap. Decisions get made in the meeting, but get unmade in the hallway. Teams with clear authority handle conflict efficiently because everyone knows who has the final say. Teams with unclear authority avoid conflict entirely, or they revisit the same issues repeatedly because no one's decision actually sticks. In the cheat sheet that I have for you, you'll find the exact process I use to discover who the real decision maker is when things get difficult, and I'll tell you about how to get it coming up. Even if your team has clear authority and handles conflict well, there's one final test that tells me whether any of this meeting energy will translate into actual results. And here's where most leadership teams completely fool themselves. They have great discussions, make clear decisions, assign next steps, and everyone leaves feeling accomplished. But 3 months later, they're having the same conversation again. And I've learned to predict which leadership teams will actually execute and which will just have great meetings. It's not about their energy level, their strategic thinking, or even their decision-making process. There's one specific moment in every meeting that tells me everything I need to know about whether this team will follow through on its commitments. Most leaders rush past this moment because they're eager to get to the new business. What I'm watching for is simple. Do they start by reviewing what was supposed to happen since the last meeting? Not just a quick, how did everyone do, but an actual review of commitments made and results delivered. More importantly, what happens when someone doesn't follow through? Do they make excuses that everyone accepts? Do they quickly move on to avoid the awkwardness? Or do they address it directly and figure out what went wrong? High execution leadership teams treat missed commitments as serious business problems that need to be solved. Low execution leadership teams treat them as personal awkwardness to be avoided. The difference shows up in how they handle that moment. What I'm measuring is your team's accountability culture, not whether people are trying hard, whether they're actually delivering on what they say they'll do and what happens when they don't. Because when teams don't review previous commitments, they're essentially telling each other, following through, it's optional. When they accept excuses without problem solving, they're rewarding non-performance. And when they rush past missed deadlines, they're training each other that commitments don't really matter. Leadership teams that execute well don't avoid accountability. They use it as a tool for improvement. Leadership teams that struggle with execution avoid accountability because they think it's mean, when actually it's the kindest thing you can do for performance. I can predict with 90% accuracy which teams will execute their plans based on how they handle accountability in their meetings. The ones that address it directly, they get results. The ones that avoid it, well, they get more meetings. If you want to know exactly what to look for in your next leadership team meeting and how to interpret what you see, I've created a practical cheat sheet that breaks down the specific patterns I watch for. It's called the Leadership Team Meeting Cheat Sheet, and it provides you with the exact behaviors to observe, their meanings, and guidance on how to address what you discover. You can download it for free at the link in the description below.